Today on Tech Tips, we're going to talk about Maglocks, how to install them, and a few tips and tricks to make the installation much easier. These are the most common types of Maglocks you're going to see in an escape room here. And these, we'll start with these big guys here. These are generally meant for your doors. These are 300 to 600 to 1200 and up. These are your sizes pound Maglocks, and these just go on the doors. This is what they're meant for. That's what all these are basically meant for. But and the pound means hold force. That means it's how much force the Maglock will hold until it gives way. So moving down here, you have your 130 pound Maglocks. These are the most common you're going to see inside of things like chests and cabinets and things of that nature. And this is the lesser seen but also useful 80 pound, which is slightly smaller than this one, as you can see here. It's a little bit smaller width-wise. It's about the same other way, all the other dimensions. What's odd about the 80 pound ones is these tend to be more expensive than either one of these for some reason. Just depends on where you get them, obviously, but you're probably going to be working with these two the most right here. So I'm going to go over with you how to install them, some tips and tricks, and a couple things you should know when dealing with Maglocks. The first step to installing a Maglock is really deciding where it goes and how much force you think it's going to need. Now, if it's a door, one of the larger Maglocks in the top left corner, let's say this is the door you're trying to secure here. This is your hinge. There's your hinges. A Maglock here in this corner is most likely fine, especially if it's a door, because that's what it's intended for, right? But let's say this is a smaller thing. This is not your typical kind of door. This is some cabinet door, a thin door, something without the sturdiness of a door, the thickness of a door. So generally, a good rule is you want to install a Maglock in the middle here of something, because if you install it up here in this side, and they can get their hands, their grubby little mitts under here, they can get purchase and pull and pop this open because you've got leverage, right? And that's something I see a lot of people don't take into account with Maglocks is the concept of leverage. If people can get any kind of leverage, any kind of purchase, they can bypass your Maglock, and they will because they're jerks. So the other thing you can do if you don't want one here, let's say this is like a doorway you have to crawl through, having a big chunk of sharp metal here may not be the most comfortable thing for somebody to ram their head or shoulder into. So what you can do instead is you can mount one here and one here. Because even if they were somehow managed to get their hands here in this part of the door, they can't actually pull because you've got two things of force. You know, if that is a 130 and a 130 or something like that, that's a fair amount of force being held in place in two very particular spots. So the other thing to take into consideration, of course, is your wiring. Obviously, you know, in a situation like this where you have two Maglocks, you have to figure out where these wires are going to go. And if you have a frame built, obviously, if there's a frame built around this door like this, obviously the wires can go up and out like this. But that's also something you have to take into consideration. That way you're not running wires up along here and having to have all like the possibility of people being able to access those wires. So just plan ahead and of where your Maglocks are going to go, how they're going to go, and even if a Maglock is the right thing, like some smaller props that I've seen, a cabinet lock would have been a better choice than a Maglock. And also the other thing to also consider if you really need a lot of holding force is there are double Maglocks, things that have a lot of holding force. So again, just a little bit of pre-planning saves you a lot of headaches down the line. So these are the parts that will come with your Maglock most likely, right? And we're going to go over how to mount the 130 pound guys first. So this one we'll talk about later. So what you're going to get in all this stuff, of course, is you're going to get your large bolt here. This is to run through a door like that. And then you have screws and other little things, an Allen wrench, and this thing here, which is probably the most important part of your kit. This is a rubber washer. You're going to want to hold on to this. Don't lose it. As a matter of fact, hoard them if you can. So hold on to that there. You're also going to get these weird little post things. and I'll explain what those do here in a little bit. And of course, the plate and the Maglock itself. One thing I want to say is, if you're going to buy Maglocks, make sure you get the ones with this little button, this little pushback thing here. There are cheap ones that do not come with this, and those cause problems because when this is magnetized onto here, what ends up happening is the plate can become magnetized and it may not let go of the base here. This little push block, little push off, enables this to let go and open up. So don't cheap out, and make sure you get the ones with these little push buttons on the plate right there. Okay. The Allen wrench is so you can remove the magnet from the actual install plate here, like this. These come out of here, and then this comes loose from the plate, and the plate is where you mount. You have countersink holes here and here for mounting, depending on how it has to be mounted, like that. And depending on how you're mounting it, there's a couple different ways to do it, and I will show you the way if I have proper access to everything, because sometimes you're trying to get behind a drawer or something like that, and it can be very cumbersome. So sometimes you have to really dial it in, and sometimes you get lucky and get it the first try. So, there's that. So, but generally the first thing I'll do is I will take and get a battery pack, a little 12-volt battery pack. You can get different shapes and sizes. This is the one I use here, and you can get them on Amazon and eBay and online stores and things like that. So what I do is I give temporary power to the Maglock here. I place the plate on, line it up about where I think I'm going to need it, and there we go. So now that should be, oh, nope, those are touching. I was like, that's not right. There we go. So now that's locked in place. What I'll do is I'll take the whole unit and I'll kind of hold it up into where I'm installing it, right, with the door open or whatever. And I'll try to line this up with the edge of where this should be, right? I'll kind of close the door. I'll measure the width of the door, kind of line this up where I think it should be as best as possible. Then I'll take a pencil and I'll just trace around the edge of this base here as best I can, right? So now I have an idea of where this unit goes, because once you get this in, you can dial it in this with the washers and other things like that. So now of course you would remove the base off of you move the magnet off of the base plate here like this. Let me unscrew that. And so then now I would take this, line it up with the pencils, and screw this in best I could, and then reattach this one more time, okay? So if you're lucky, and you only have to do this once, and if you're unlucky, you may have to move it back a little bit, over a little bit. You'll kind of get the hang of it as you do more installs of these types of things. So once you get that done, it's time to install this guy here. And one thing that I see a lot of people skip this step, and it causes a lot of problems. And that step is installing these barrel pin hinges here, these things. And what these are for is these go into these holes here, like this. And I found the best way to install these is to take like some needle nose pliers and hold them in place, and a hammer, put it on a solid surface, and just hit it as hard as possible to put it in. Some of the instructions you'll see online make it seem like you can just take these and by hand and force them in, and those people are liars. That is not how that works. And so you want to put these in. And there's a couple reasons for it. The main one is if you don't, these will, once it's installed, it can spin against the wood, and it can move more than it should. Here's the thing about these. These are meant to go on doors. Thick wood like this. Like this is about the size of a door here, right? And so you're going to have to drill, you have to drill 3 holes if you want to do this. One, which is bigger than this, so this can slip in easily. Just not bigger than the head of this thing here. And the other one is to make sure that these can go down. You don't want these snug. You want these to have a little bit of play, like this. These are just here to prevent this from spinning. I've been and repaired so many escape rooms where they just let these things move freely, and it can be very frustrating. So the way these are supposed to be installed is this bolt goes through here, and then this just gets screwed onto here, hopefully. There we go. Like that. This is going to take a screwdriver. Here we go. Like this. and you just, you know, take and screw this very, very long bolt into your door, right? Now, the thing about this is, actually, this bolt may be too long for this. This may be for a different thing. Anyway, so the problem is, this is not generally how you're going to install these unless it's the big ones, right? This is because you'll end up with this. If you try to install it with something like this is clearly not enough here. Okay, so what I tend to see is because sometimes you don't want a visible point of contact. You know, you don't want this giant bolt kind of telling people there's something here on the back of a door. But sometimes it can't be helped. You know, if it's thick enough, and you don't, if it's about like half this thick or something like that, you can use a screw. You can get away with a screw or something like that. Just be aware that over time a screw might eventually strip if you use the wrong kind or if it's too short. Like a screw into something like this wouldn't be great because it can eventually pull free. And one of the things you'll notice here is I've already drilled the holes. By the way, when you're drilling the holes for these side pins, be careful. You only need to go a little bit. Don't go all the way through like I did. It's not a fun mistake to make. just wanted to show you that. So once again, this is going to go here. Now you'll notice I've drilled a big hole here, and there's a reason for that. Because if you're trying to mount into something thin like this, and you don't mind if you see some point of contact here, I have found these to be very, very handy, and these are called Chicago screws. They have actually a bunch of different names that you can find online, but the one that I find easiest to remember is Chicago screw. And you can even go to the website chicagoscrews.com, and they have various lengths and sizes of all sorts. And what's great is these are flush mount. These are great for just mounting things extremely flush. And so what happens is it's basically the same thing as this. It's just a smaller version of it. So what I will do is I will take this and I will put that in there so people don't think they have to unscrew anything. And it's the exact same thing, but it's perfect for a smaller, or I should say a thinner mounting surface here like that. So now you just take this. Now you'll notice the one thing I have forgotten to do, and it was intentional, was put the rubber washer there. And because what happens is that once you tighten this has no play to it. This thing cannot move once it's tightened down. And that's one of the biggest problems with a Maglock that people have online is they're like, oh, it doesn't sit flush, I've got it mounted, and everybody's like, did you use the rubber washer? And they're like, no. And that's one of the problems because, wood with temperature and time swells, it changes shape and stuff like that. So this allows for your plate to make corrections for that. So once this is in place, you'll see that this has some flex to it. This can move, and that's what you want, because if it hits it at an angle or the base has for some reason shifted or even a little bit off, this will allow the plate to just kind of go and lock in place. If it's sitting completely flush, it won't lock at all. And of course, the posts keep it from being able to rotate. And that helps with reset and on things like that. So that is how I feel the easiest way to mount one of these. And of course, this can be painted black and it's flush and it's nowhere near as large and obtrusive as this here. But again, if you don't want something like this visible, then you can use a screw. Just make sure you use the right kind of screw. Before I move on to the larger Maglock, I want to show you something with the 80-pound one here. And I remember I said before that you want a bolt or a plate with one of these little push button things on it right here, right? Well, these 80-pound ones do not have that. At least the ones that I have don't. They don't have that. It's just a flat metal plate. But what they've done is they've put a little rubber washer that sticks up a smidge higher than the plate itself, which acts as the same thing. Now, of course, you're going to run into the problem of if you decide you want to mount it not in the traditional way, using this bolt, you're going to have to make sure you have something here. And I've heard tales of people using like painter's tape or just a thin layer of masking tape of some sorts to help keep the bond just slightly. It's enough to hold it, but not enough to keep the plate on there if it pops open and doesn't get magnetically charged. So that's just something else I wanted to cover. So here's the large Maglocks here, and again, these are most likely going to be used on doors or something that is going to require a lot of holding force. Now, one thing that's very interesting about these that I like is what comes with these larger ones is this little sticker here that lets you kind of line up the mounting plate. It shows you where the holes here go for the things in the back and where this hole goes. So you peel this off, stick it on the door, and you just drill into it. It's like a template. Does it come in handy? Sometimes, but usually it does. That way you kind of have an idea of where the thing should go. The first thing you want to do is remove this screw here, or loosen it, I should say. This set screw, like that. And we'll just unscrew that there. And there we go, that comes out. Now, the reason for that is so you can get this other Allen wrench down inside of these holes here. And inside of here are the screws that actually hold the plate on, like this. So it's the actual screws. These are the Phillips head and things. Believe it or not, you don't need. And, you know, might need some pliers or something, because this thing apparently is wants to be a jerk. There we go. So these, it's not really intuitive. I mean, it says it in the instructions, but if you've never done this, it's not exactly the first kind of thing you'd be like, huh, that seems like a good idea. Actually, you know what? I take that back. We do have to remove the screw on this one, because it is basically blocking the Allen wrench. Let's try that again. And there we go. Now that one has come loose. It's a lot of it seems like a lot of hassle for what it is, considering how easy the other one was. But it's because these are a little more involved, I really need some pliers. Hold on a second. Here we go. And now, as you can see, the plate is mostly off. There we go. So now, this is the plate that you're going to mount to the door. The door jamb, actually, the top of it, like that. And one thing that I've encountered with these is sometimes the door jamb, the metal frame, is wonky. It's a weird shape that was not intended for these, so this will never be consistent. The installation of these will never be the same 100% of the time, just so you know. So, but if you install these into the door, this goes on, screws here, is countersunk as last time. And again, you're just gonna, now you're gonna do the same, you're gonna basically do the opposite of what you just did here. You're gonna run the wires up through here, make sure there's a hole for your wires to run to, and we'll talk a little more about wiring in a little bit. And now you just re-screw everything back together. Once you have this installed, you test it, of course, and what I like about these in particular, these larger ones, and certain brands have this, certain brands don't, but these in particular do. These have a light on them, an LED here, so you can see when it is on and when it is not. You can see that LED right there going on and off, like that. So when power is killed to this door, you know it, or if it's not on or off. Now there are other ones, there are other brands out there like Seco Alarm and a few others that have like basically a reed switch built into these, so that when the door is open or closed, depending on the state of the door, this will either be like off or on or green instead of red. There are certain brands that just give you a state change, so you know what is going on when the door is open, unlocked, or whatnot. So be aware of that as well. One of the things I did not cover in the previous section was how to kind of get these plates where you figure out kind of where you want to drill the holes. So if for some reason you've bought one of these and it doesn't come with a handy dandy template, or you just have lost it, or whatever, for whatever reason, what I have found that helps is after you have these pins installed, you drill the hole first so you know where it goes. So like right here, what I had done is I had drilled this hole, and I kind of lined it up best I could. And then what I did was I just took a hammer, rubber mallet, like this, and I'm going to turn this way. And so if there wasn't a hole here, if there wasn't a hole right there, this would just rest here. But what you do is you take this and hit it sharply, and once you've done that, this little doodad here leaves a hole. a little mark on the wood, and now you know where to drill into and drill your holes and line it up like that. So that's another little handy tip for you there. So let's talk about troubleshooting problems with a Maglock. Now, one of the things I hear a lot on forums and stuff is people saying, oh, when my Maglock discharges, it triggers something else or causes something random to happen. And that is from electromagnetic interference from the collapse of a magnetic coil. Relays do it, and these do it. Now, generally, relays, if you get them on little modules, they already have all this built in. And these, under here, this plate that is here, this plate has a bunch of protection circuitry built into it. So these larger ones, you don't generally have to worry about the electromagnetic interference shooting back down the line because it's all built in. But these smaller guys, these don't have it. These are just a coil and some wires in a housing. And so what a flyback diode does is it prevents the electromagnetic interference from shooting down the line. And what ends up happening is, and I'll draw this out for you so you kind of understand it here. So this is a diode. Now, a flyback diode isn't technically a special kind of diode. It's just more like the placement, but it does require it needs to be able to handle a certain amount of amperage and or voltage. And so I'll show you kind of how this works. All right, and one of the things you want is you want the flyback diode as close to the Maglock, the problem area, as possible. Okay, so you have your Maglock here, obviously, and a diode, and this is because it's small here. I'm going to draw a larger one for you to see. This diode, there'll be a line like this. This line here is where you want your positive line to go, and that's where your negative line goes. Right there. So what's going to happen is you're going to tie this across these two lines like this. So your Maglock, you're going to run this to here and just tie this into your thing like that. And then this will continue to power, right? This will just go off to where it needs to be. And that's really it. Just be sure to plan for this. Now, you don't always need these because certain controllers and things like that have a lot of other protection circuitry built in. You know, Baddest controllers, Fright props, all these things, Fright Idiots controllers, all these things have this stuff built into them. Now, it's still a good idea to have it just in case. But, because if you're running a bunch of wires next to each other, it can still affect the wires before it gets to the controller. But just make sure you plan ahead for this kind of stuff. And you can get diodes online, the right kind, and I'll put the specs that you probably need here on the screen and everything like that. You can get these online in packs, and they're not expensive, but it is something that you need to be aware of that exists, and it can fix a lot of your problems. The last thing I want to talk to you about is, of course, fire safety. You will run into major issues with your fire marshal if they think or know that there is something that locks people in and they cannot get out. So one of the things that you should have, no matter what, quite frankly, even if once this turns off, it can never relock, it's a good idea to have bypass buttons on either side of your wall where your Maglocks are, especially if it is any kind of doorway or anywhere, an egress of any kind. So I'm going to kind of talk about how to wire up buttons, multiple buttons and things like that. And it's not very hard, but it can confuse some people. And there's different types of buttons online, and what you need, first off, is you need a button that has a normally closed port. That is the most important thing. Make sure you get NC, normally closed. Do not get NO. NO is no, right? Don't get one of these because your Maglock won't work at all because normally closed, it has to make contact, right? So let's talk about, first off, we'll talk about wiring up in one button, okay? So let's say your power source is over here, whatever your 12 volt power source of however you get to it is, all right? And here is your minus, here is your positive. Negative, positive, minus and positive. Okay. So the best practice, and I've talked about this in other videos, but I'm talking about it here. The best practice is to run your negative line to your negative power and nothing there. And then your button, this will be our button here. Your button runs and interrupts the positive line. So from here to here, right? That's the basics of it. That's really all you need. And again, this button is a normally closed button, which means power is flowing. And when you push the button, power is no longer flowing, and the lock unlocks. And that's pretty much the basics of it. So if you have some sort of wall, let's say, and you need to have a button on both sides, which again is something I recommend that you do. The way to do that is pretty much the exact same thing you're looking at here, right? There's nothing is really different. So I'm going to draw a wall here. So here is a doorway from the side, right? And here's your Maglock. And you need a button here and a button here, okay? So what's going to happen is it's going to be the exact same thing that we pretty much just drew. You're going to have your 12-volt power source here, like that. Here's your negative, here's your positive. And again, the negative source runs all the way to there, and you're just going to wire your buttons essentially in series, all right? And the way to do that looks something like this. So here's one button, here's two buttons. For some reason, this one's bigger than the other. So it's the exact same thing. You're just running one into here, and then this wire runs out to this one, and then this runs out to this. It's as simple as that. And of course, your wall would be here, separating your two buttons like that. So if this button gets pushed, it drops the power. If this button gets pushed, it drops the power. But as long as the buttons don't get pushed, because they are, once again, what, boys and girls? That's right, these are normally closed buttons, or buttons that have a normally closed function, because some have both, just so you know. This is how you set this up, and it's just that easy. Don't get too confused by anything else. Just set up your bypass buttons like this. Your fire marshal will be happy, your customers will be happy, and your employees will be happy that they didn't close the door by accident and get trapped in a room and had to call somebody else to come get them out, because that happens. Hey guys, make sure you check out some of these other videos we have here. And of course, if you want to keep up with anything we're doing, make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and make sure you also check out testsubjects.com for more info. And if you have something very specific you want us to go over, please let us know in the comments below. See you next time.